a member of the delegation until he heard about it through the media. So it does look as if this delegation, these negotiations, as the Prime Minister is calling them, is very much a matter of the government negotiating with people whom it deems to represent the protesters, but whom the protesters say they have nothing to do with.
Jasper, we're looking at the same images, I imagine, that you are, and at the moment the police seem to be centred around the sort of entrance to Gezi Park. It was clear from what Prime Minister Erdogan was saying in Parliament that he wanted the protesters to leave Gezi Park. Was there any indication that they would abide by his request?
No, not at all. In fact, this morning when I was asking them about the Prime Minister's offer of negotiations, and they were saying, one, no negotiations until the government resigns, two, that this delegation was an attempt to divide the protesters. Another protester said, you know, look, we haven't had time to discuss what we're going to do. We've been under attack. But you notice from these pictures now that the protesters are locking arms, standing at the edge of Gezi Park. They look determined to hold their ground.
They certainly do. Let me at this point just bring in Armin Georgian, our International Affairs Editor. Armin, it appears that Prime Minister Erdogan, given the speech he's just made in Turkish Parliament, he's certainly not bowing to the protesters' demands, far from it. He's been very hardline in what he has to say.
Yes, not only does that come out in the actions of the police, but also in Erdogan's recent behaviour in elsewhere. For example, when he called for rallies at the weekend to bring his supporters out to make sure that his supporters around the country would teach these protesters a lesson, as he put it, for defying the party in power. So he's been trying to channel this, deflect this away from him, away from the charge that he's acting arrogantly or dictatorially, and actually make it seem as though this is an affront and a challenge to everything that the AK party has built up over the last 10 years. And you have to bear in mind, of course, there is a gap, in a sense, between some of the, the kinds of liberals that you find in Istanbul that go to this sort of protest, and the heartlands, particularly in the east of the country, which has given him this massive support over the years in elections, or high percentages of support. And that's really what he's focused on now, is to ensure that that base doesn't abandon him, that it votes for the AK in local and presidential elections next year as well.
Let me just remind our viewers what we're looking at. We're looking at live images there from just outside Gezi Park in central Istanbul, where we believe the Turkish police are just about to enter the park. This follows statements made earlier today by Prime Minister Erdogan in the Turkish parliament, in which he had ordered the protesters to immediately leave the park. The park, of course, being the site of a protest that's been going on for close to 2 weeks. It began over a fairly simple protest, that is over supposed construction of a shopping mall in the Gezi Park region, but it's sort of expanded now to include a list of grudges, if you like, against the Erdogan government, saying that he is attempting to impose authoritarian rule and conservative Islamic values on a secular society. Let's now go back to Jasper Mortimer in Istanbul. Jasper, tell me a little bit about the protesters in Gezi Park. You know, who are they? Are they just young people, young secular people, or are they starting to include a broader range of the population?
They are overwhelmingly secular people, but you do see headscarfed women, and there was on Friday a delegation calling themselves anti-capitalist Muslims who observed Friday prayers on the steps of Gezi Park, where the police have now gathered. They all bowed down towards Damascus, and there was about 150 of them. So I would say about 95% of the crowd is firmly secular, but there is an observant Muslim presence for sure. Among the secularists, there is almost every political shade you can imagine. There are hardline communists, Marxists, Leninists, there are social democrats, there are Kurds, there are Kurdish nationalists. The Kurdish Nationalist Party, the BDP, has occupied a corner of Gezi Park for several days now, flying flags of Upper Öcalan, the PKK leader, whom most Turks regard as a terrorist, but no Turk has torn down the Öcalan flag. They seem to be tolerating each other very nicely.